Hi everybody, so these are going to be the guided notes for standards 7 and 8. This is going to be the content for week 4. Basically in the first part of these notes, what we're going to be doing is we're going to work on writing out statements for parts of these triangles that correspond and that are congruent to each other. So some of the things that you're going to see on this page, for instance in these first two triangles, we see these marks that are across the side lengths. Those are called tick marks. Same thing for these angle marks that you're going to see. Now these angles in these first two triangles are a specific type of angle. This box here actually tells us that this angle is 90 degrees. But these are also a type of tick mark. And you'll see in example 2 also, between different angles we have these tick marks in the corners for the angles. And those are going to be information that are telling us that those pieces, not only do they correspond to each other, but they actually have the same measurement, that they are congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with problem number 1 and list for you the pieces that are going to be congruent. So we can see that in the triangle on the left, that segment BA has 1 tick mark, and the triangle on the right, segment KJ, has 1 tick mark. So because they each have 1 tick mark, those are going to be congruent parts for between those two triangles. So I'm going to go ahead and write out my first statement here. So when I name this segment, I can call it either segment BA or segment AB. And remember, when you name a segment, you need to put the symbol for segment over top. And I'm going to use the symbol for congruent. So a congruent symbol is an equals with a curve over the top. And we're going to say that segment BA is congruent to segment KJ. Now when I look at these angles, I see that there's a 90-degree angle mark in the corner where A is at and in the corner where J is at. Because there's only one angle here, the easiest way to name this angle is to just call it angle A. So I can say angle A is congruent to angle J. And because there's no other information, I don't have a tick mark on these sides, I don't have tick marks on these sides, and there are no markings in any of the other angles. That's going to be the only 2 pieces of information that I'm going to have for problem number 1. Okay, so let's take a look at problem number 2. In number 2, as you notice, there's no tick marks on any of the sides, but there are tick marks in a couple of the different angles. So when there is a single arc or tick mark in D and in J, that means that those are a pair of congruent angles. So I'm going to go ahead and write that angle D is congruent to angle J. And then down here I see that there are 2 arcs or a double tick mark in E and in angle K. So I can say angle E is congruent to angle K. All right, so what I'd like for you guys to do, if you look at the rest of the page, problems 3 through 10 are going to have you do the same exact thing. So I want you to pause the video at this point. I want you to go ahead and go through problems 3 through 10, and just like we did with problem 1 and 2, go ahead and list the pieces that are congruent between the 2 triangles. Okay, so hopefully you're able to pause the video and work on those problems. I'm going to go ahead and start going through the answers for those. There are going to be some things that you may have missed. We kind of did that on purpose, just because there's some new concepts, some things that you don't quite yet know about with some of the triangular figures in certain problems. So let's take a look at number 3. Number 3 is pretty straightforward. We have a double tick mark on this segment LM and a double tick mark on this segment TS. So I can say segment LM is congruent to segment TS. And we see that we have an angle marking for M and the same one for S. So I can say angle M is congruent to angle S. All right, now on number 4, let's take a look at number 4. I have double tick marks on this segment right here between U and V. And I have double tick marks on this segment between K and V. Now, there weren't any other tick marks on the sides. There is actually one other piece of information here, and this is a new concept, so this isn't something that we've talked about yet. But anytime that lines cross in the middle like this, these angles that are formed by that intersection are going to be congruent. So you're going to add marks here, and I'm going to tell you what the names of those angles are. So these angles are actually going to be called vertical angles. And we'll spend more time talking about vertical angles in another section. But for right now, you just need to know that when lines cross like this, that these angles that are formed are going to be congruent. And because those are congruent, we can add them as another piece of information for this problem. Now, there's a specific way that you have to name them. It's not going to be enough for me to say that angle V is congruent to angle V. I've got to be more specific because there's more than one angle at this vertex. So just like in class for that first lesson, when we name this angle here, so if I'm naming this angle, I have to use 3 letters. And you remember when this is the vertex, that V will have to go in the middle of those 3 letters. So I can either call this angle WVU or angle UVW. So I'm going to go ahead and name that angle UVW. And then now I'm going to name the angle on this side. So I called this angle UVW. I'm going to go ahead and name this angle KVM. Okay, so just remember that new concept there, when we have those lines intersecting, that those angles are going to be called vertical angles. All right, let's take a look at number 5. So question number 5, I have double tick marks on this segment, which is segment RQ, making sure I put the symbol over top. And I have a double tick mark on this segment, and I'm going to call that segment DS. Okay. Now I don't have tick marks on the other sides, and I don't have any angle information, but think about how in this picture that this side right here is actually shared between the two triangles. So this triangle on the top has a side length that is SQ, and this triangle on the bottom also has a side length that is SQ. So because they share that same side length, we're going to go ahead and add a tick mark on that shared side. And for those two figures, we're going to list that common side as another piece of information that we can write down. So when they are connected by that side length, I can say that I can name this either QS or SQ, but I can say that segment QS is congruent to segment QS. So that's going to be the only 2 pieces of information for problem number 5. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at problem number 6. So in problem number 6, the only marks that I have are for these 2 angles. Because this vertex has more than one angle, I can't call this angle T and I can't call this angle T. So again, I'm going to have to use 3 letters. So for this angle right here, I'm going to have to make sure that T, the vertex, is in the middle, and I can call it DTU or UTD. So I'm going to call that angle DTU. And I'm going to say angle DTU is congruent to this angle right here. And again, using 3 letters with the vertex in the middle, I'm going to call this angle STU. So that's my pair of angles from the diagram. Now, look at the similarities between number 5 that we just talked about and number 6. They also have a shared side here in the middle. So I'm going to add a tick mark for that shared side. Because this top triangle has a side length UT and the bottom triangle has the same side length UT, I can say that segment UT is congruent to segment UT. So that's going to be all the corresponding parts for number 6. Let's take a look at number 7. On problem number 7, similar to number 5 and number 6, I have this shared side down the middle again. So I'm going to add a tick mark. And again, you can call this segment XV or segment VX. So I'm going to say segment XV is congruent to segment XV. And the only other information that we have has to do with the angle in this corner and the angle in this top corner. Again, I cannot call this angle V because there's more than one angle at this vertex. So I'm going to have to use 3 letters, and I have to make sure that V is in the middle, and I only want to name this angle right here. So I'm going to call this angle WVX. And when I go to name the other angle, the one in this top corner that is at X, it's the same situation. I'm going to make sure that X is in the middle, but I'm going to call this angle KXV. So that would be the only 2 pieces of information for number 7. Taking a look at number 8. Number 8 is pretty straightforward. I have a double tick mark for angle L. And again, how come I can call that angle L? Well, there's only one angle at that vertex, so I can go ahead and call that angle L. And that's going to be congruent to the angle over in the first triangle that also has a double tick mark, and that's going to be angle X. The other pair of angles, I have a triple tick mark for angle Y and for angle M. So I can say angle M is congruent to angle Y. Let's go ahead and take a look at problem number 9. All right, with problem number 9, we have, so similar to problems 5, 6, and 7, we have a shared side here. So I'm going to add a tick mark, and I can call this either segment GH or segment HG. So I can say GH is congruent to GH. And then I do have a pair of angles here. So remember, again, for this angle right here, G is the vertex, but because there's more than one angle, I've got to use 3 letters. So I can call this angle VGH or angle HGV. So I'm going to say angle VGH is congruent to, and then for the angle in this corner right here, because H is the vertex, I can call it angle IHG or angle GHI. So that's going to be the 2 pieces of information I would need from this diagram. Problem number 10. Once again, we have this common side here in the middle. So we see that DC is congruent to DC, because both of these triangles have that as a side length and it's shared, so it's going to be congruent. Now, for this angle right here, there are 2 angles here that are congruent. And I can't call them angle D because there's more than one angle at that vertex. So for the one on this side, I'm going to make sure the D is in the middle, but I can call it either TDC or CDT. For the other angle down here, I can call this, again, D is going to be in the middle of the name, but I can call it angle EDC or angle CDE. Okay, so that's going to be it for the front page of the notes. So hopefully you guys understand how to go ahead and list those congruent corresponding parts between the 2 triangles.